Alright, now we have a brand new React application. Before start using the library React Hook Form, let's replicate the typical way of creating React forms without using any form library. So that starting with next lecture, we can discuss difficulties in doing so and compare it with the way of creating forms with React Hook Form library. Now, by the way, this is the third video in this series of React Hook Form tutorials. You could find rest of the videos and recommended references along with the GitHub repository of the demo project in video description and inside the first comment of this video. Now first of all, I'll be creating the component food delivery form. Now since we are creating a TypeScript component, make sure to use the extension TSX. Now in order to create the component, I'll be using this snippet RAFC. It will create a React component using arrow function. Snippets like this will be available once you install this extension ES7 React Redux React Native Snippets. Now let's add this component inside the default app component here. Instead of this div, we'll add the newly created component. In order to add the corresponding import statement, you can use the shortcut, hold Ctrl, then press space. Now select the respective import statement from the suggestion list so that the same will be added at the top. So here we have added the newly created component and this is how it looks like. Now in order to design this form, first of all, obviously we'll be creating a state object to store the field values of the form. So here we go, values, and here we have the corresponding set values method. Let's initialize it with the use state hook. Currently the shortcut is not working, so in these situations you have to manually add the corresponding import statement like this. Import from React, we have to import use state hook. Now since we have a TypeScript component here, it's always recommended to define the type of the data in advance so that we can fix a lot of errors at compile time itself and we can make sure that the data is type safe inside the app. So I will define the type here. Food delivery form type. Now currently we are only adding two properties, rest of them can be added later. So first of all we have customer name which is of the type string. Now to add the second property, I will just copy paste this line so you can use this shortcut. Once you place the cursor on the line, Ctrl C then Ctrl V, and here we have the second property mobile which is also having the type string. Now let's pass this type into this use state hook like this. From now onwards, we can only assign values or object to the state object values according to the defined type. Now let's initialize the state object. For that, I will copy paste this type here. Now we just need to replace this string with an empty string. For that, I will select this string. Then we can make use of the VS Code shortcut, hold Ctrl, then press D, so that the next occurrence of the same highlighted word will be selected and we can modify all of them at once like this. Press backspace and then here we have an empty string. That's it. Now let's design a form having input fields for these two properties. So first of all, we have a form element. We don't need this action attribute. Inside them, we can have the input fields. For that, I will be using the bootstrap form elements. You can see here the overview. Normally we use an input label pair like this, but for this application I'll be using this style here, floating label, so that the placeholder will be shown by default inside the input control. When we place the cursor inside the input control, the placeholder will be floated like this. To copy the same styles, I will copy this div here and let's paste it here inside the app and let's make the required changes. First of all, in React, instead of the class attribute, we have to provide class name. So in order to replace them all at once, I will be using the shortcut Ctrl D. So both of these class attributes are selected. Now to position the cursor at the end of the words, hit the right arrow. Now we just need to add name like this. And we don't need this ID attribute here. Now there is no reason for keeping this for attribute on this label element. Now for this input element, you could see an error saying that it has no corresponding closing tag. This input control is a self-enclosing tag, so we can close the tag on this tag itself. Now to format the written code, hold Shift and Alt together, then press F. Now first of all, we have customer name. So the input control will be of the type text. And I will change this placeholder to customer name and let's pass the same inside this label also. So here we have the floating label input for customer name. Now we have to assign the value of this input control from the state object values like this. Value is equal to values dot customer name. So whatever default value we give here, it should be populated inside the control like this. Now if you open the developer console, you could see an error like this. It says that this input control is assigned with a value here without providing on change event. So either we have to make this input control as read only, or we have to provide an on change event to update the value of the assigned value here. At present, if you try to change the value of this input control, it won't work because this input control can only display the value inside the given property here. In order to fix this issue, normally we wire up a function to handle the on change event like this. Handle input change. Let's define the function here. For this function, we have the default parameter e, which is of the type change event. So when you are working with TypeScript, it's better to provide the type of the parameter whenever you define a function. So you just need to familiar with common types like this. So for change event, the event parameter will be having the type change event. So this is a generic type. Into it, we can specify that we are currently dealing with HTML input elements. Now let me switch into the Zen mode so that we can avoid a lot of distractions inside the IDE. So go to View, then Appearance, then Zen mode, or you can use the shortcut, hold Control, then press K, release both of them, then press EZ. In order to toggle the visibility of the File Explorer, you can use the shortcut Control B like this. And in order to see the menu items, you can use Alt. Okay. Now, if you want to navigate a file without File Explorer, you can use the shortcut Control P and then you can search the file name here like this. Now, in order to navigate within open tabs, you can use the shortcut Control Tab like this. So the same shortcut Control Tab can be used to switch into recently opened file like this. Okay. Now within this function, we have to update the value of the state property corresponding to the input control from which this input change event is triggered. But there is a problem. This method handle input change is a common function to handle input change events of all text boxes. In this case, we have to add one more input control for mobile. So in order to identify from which input control this handle input change is triggered, we'll add the name attribute like this. Name is equal to, we'll provide the name of the input control with the same name as that of the corresponding state property here. Because within this event parameter E, there is an object called target. Within that, we have the name of the input control and the new value of the control. So thereby we can identify from which input control this input change event is triggered. So this is what we have been doing. We'll destructure the name of the input control and the new value of the control from this event target. Sorry, we forgot the arrow here. Now we just need to update the corresponding property using the set method here. Sorry, we have to define this method within this component, then only we can access the set method. So inside this, we have to pass an object with the new values. So first of all, we'll destructure whatever we have inside the values object. Then we just need to update the property corresponding to the input control from which this input change event is triggered. Since we have given the same property name as the name attribute here, we can assign it like this. Name is equal to the new value. Now, if you didn't grasp what happened within the input change method completely, explaining JavaScript destructuring syntax will be helpful. And it is necessary in this course going forward. So here we have a simple JavaScript project in Code Sandbox, which is an online IDE. So here we have the JavaScript index.js, which is added inside this index.html, and whatever we log into the developer console could be seen inside this console tab here. Okay. And preview of HTML elements could be seen here. So here we have an object user having these properties name and password. As the term destructuring implies, it's the process of unpacking something. Well, in case of JavaScript objects, it's the process of unpacking key value pairs. So this is what we do with destructuring. Constant name is equal to the object user. So what's going on here is that the user object will get destructured so that this name variable will get assigned with the value from this name property within the object. So this is like creating a constant variable name, and its value is destructured from this user object name property here. So the property must match with the variable name here. Now to verify the same, let's log the variable name like this. Let me reload this. See, like this we can destructure the password also. So here we have created a new constant password and its value is assigned from this property here. Let's print the same inside this log statement. So here we go. So that's what we have done inside the handle input change function. First of all, we have destructured name and value from the object event target. So during this destructuring, the containing key value pairs of this user object is destructured into these constants here. Apart from that, we can use destructuring to create another objects from already existing objects. For example, let me create another object user profile. Currently we have an empty object, and inside that I will destructure the key value pairs of this existing object user. For that, we just need to prefix the user object with 3 consecutive dots like this. So whatever key value pairs that we have inside the user object becomes a part of this new object here. Let's print the value of this user profile. See, here we have the same key value pairs from the user object. So that's what we have done while passing the arguments to the setValues method. Now in addition to the destructured key value pairs, you can add extra properties like this. So here we have the new property full name. So that's what we have exactly done here. Instead of directly providing the name of the key here, you could store that in another variable like this. Key name is equal to full name. And if you pass the variable within square brackets like this, during runtime, this variable will be replaced with the value here and it becomes the name of the property. So any value you pass to this variable here, it becomes the name of the respective property. See? So that's what we have done with the name variable here. Inside our state object values, we already have a property with the same name. Thereby, in effect, it overrides the respective property with the new value of the control. For now, this is enough. We'll get back to this code snippet later to explain more about JavaScript destructuring. So this is how we have been implementing input change event normally in a typical form. Now let's update the attributes of this input control for mobile. Corresponding value will be assigned from this mobile property. I will assign the same placeholder to the label here. Now make sure to provide the name attribute same as that of the corresponding property from the state object. Now instead of this default value, we'll pass an empty string. Now let's check whether it works or not. Now currently we don't have any error, so whatever we type in these input controls, the corresponding property from the state object values will be updated here. In order to see the values inside the values object, we can add a submit button like this. Class name, I will assign it from bootstrap btn, then btn primary. Inside the button, we will show this text submit. Now let's add a form submit event. So here we go, on submit is equal to on submit. Now let's define the method here. It is having a single event parameter which is of the type synthetic event of the type HTML form element. Now inside the method, we'll just log the value of the state object values. Now let's try the form submit. Now if I submit the form, the value of the state object should be printed here. But as a result of the default form submit event, the page will get reloaded and you could see the values of the input fields in it inside the query string like this. So this is what we do. We will prevent the default behavior of the form submit event like this. e.preventDefault method can be called. Now let's reload the app. Try the same inputs. Submit the form. Boom. Whatever we provide inside these input controls will be updated inside the state object also. Okay. Now in order to prevent the previously posted data from auto-filling into input controls, we can set this property autocomplete as off. Now this is how we handle a form submit event in a typical React form. Now before introducing our hero, React hook form, let me also show you how we have been handling form validations in a typical form. For that, we'll be creating another state variable called errors, so that we can store the error messages inside the object. So here we have the errors and the corresponding set method. Now instead of using same type as that of these values object, it's better to create a separate type for storing error messages like this, form error type. Because for properties corresponding to fields, we might have non-string properties also, but to store error messages, we only need string properties. Now let's pass the same object here. Now we'll define a separate function like this, validate form data. It's a function without any parameter. So here we go. Here we have already initialized the properties with empty string. Now inside this method, we'll create a local variable errors having the type food delivery error type, and we'll initialize it like this. For now, as part of the validation, we just need to make these two fields as required. So here we go. If values dot customer name is equal to an empty string, we'll update the corresponding error message like this. Customer name is required. In order to validate mobile number, I will copy paste this below, and let's use the Ctrl+D shortcut, and let's update this to mobile, and let's modify the corresponding error message. Mobile number is required. Finally, we'll update this local variable errors into the errors state object like this. Set errors, and inside that we can pass this object errors. Now from this function, we have to return a boolean value indicating whether this form as a whole is valid or not. For that, I will do this. We can call this method values from object. Into it, we'll just pass this local variable errors. So this method values will return an array of the values of the object errors, which are these error messages that we have assigned here. Now on the returned array, we can call this array method every. You could see the corresponding method official documentation here. So this is what it does. Inside this method, we will pass a condition as a callback function. And if all of the elements inside the array satisfies the condition, then this method will return true. And if there is at least one array element not satisfying the condition, then it will return false. So here we have the callback function specifying the condition. It is only having one single parameter x, which is corresponding to the array element, or you could say the error messages that we have provided here. So here we have the condition. If all of the elements inside the array is an empty string, then this method will return true, meaning that there is no validation error. So this is how we check whether a form as a whole is valid or not. Now we just need to call this method inside the form submit event here. If form as a whole is valid, we'll print the form data like this. Else we'll print this message, form is invalid. Now before testing this validation, let me rename this local variable errors because we have used the same name for this state object errors also. They won't conflict each other, but just to avoid the confusion, let's rename it using the shortcut F2. I will name it as temporary errors. Now let's check whether the validation is working or not. Currently we have a fresh form with empty string as default values. So when we submit this form, we should get the error form is invalid. Now let's try after populating these fields. Submit the form. That's it. Form data is printed, meaning that form as a whole is valid. Now I'm not getting into displaying the error messages along with the corresponding input fields, because independent of whether you use the package React hook form or not, way of displaying the error message is not going to change. So this is how we often design and maintain a React form. I'm not saying all of us are exactly doing what we are doing here. Most of us might be finding a way to reuse some of the functions or states that we have created here. Now in next lecture, we're going to show you how to create the same form using React hook form. So thereby you will know why you should use a form library like React hook form. So see you in next lecture.